Hi everybody and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. For quite some time now, many Muslims have been making the assertion that the Kaaba is mentioned in the Bible, and that one specific part within the Bible mentions Mecca and describes a house of worship or house of God in Mecca. They refer to Psalms 84, which apparently mentions a certain valley of Bakka, and there is apparently also a well there in that valley of Bakka, and people go to worship there. And that, they say, is too similar to Mecca, where people also go for pilgrimage to worship, and there is also the Zamzam well in Mecca. Today I want to make a comprehensive analysis of this Muslim claim and show that it is very far-fetched, that it relies on ignorance, on deception, mostly self-deception. And I know this video will be a little bit overkill, but nobody does it, so I will just take it seriously. First off, why do Muslims try so hard to find the Kaaba or Mecca in the Bible? As I have explained in several videos now, Islam makes the claim that the Kaaba is the first house built for Allah, and this is the most precious thing on the earth. It was built by Abraham, according to Islam, for all humanity, and all humanity is supposed to come to the Kaaba for pilgrimage. And according to Islam, this started in the time of Abraham. The Quran calls Mecca the mother of cities, and Muslims have generally adopted this idea that Mecca was a hugely important city that played a universal role. It was a center of trade and of worship, and people from all around the world came there. So they have to somehow back up the historicity of this and show to us that that was indeed true. They have to explain the missing link between Islam and between Abrahamic religion, because if Abraham built it and if it was so significant, so universal, then it should have some link to Abrahamic religion, but it doesn't seem to have a link. It must also be found in those older books, the scriptures, the Bible, because according to the Muslim narrative, those books were revealed or inspired by the same Allah, but people then went astray or misinterpreted or corrupted those scriptures. As many people have seen recently in a discussion between me and Muslim apologists, the main claim is that Psalms 84 mentions Mecca. So let's just get right into that.
You know, the Bible, Psalm 84, talks about a valley of Becca, where there is a temple called Beit El, house of God.
What they claim is that it is mentioned in this part of the psalm. Blessed is the person whose strength is in you, in whose heart are the roads to Zion. Passing through the valley of Bakka, they make it a spring. The early rain also covers it with blessings. They go from strength to strength. Every one of them appears before God in Zion. Although many people who are familiar with the Bible might already find this a little bit ridiculous, I want to go into everything that is wrong about this claim. And I will start with one very significant problem, which is that these passages don't talk about something called Bakka. What the passage says is, passing through the valley of Bakka, they make it a spring. The word here, which is not Latinized the way Arabic is Latinized, is not Bakka or Bakka, which sounds similar to Mecca. It is Bakka. The Muslim claim is that it is Bakka, and that the Quran mentions Mecca as Mecca and as Bakka, and that Bakka was an old name of Mecca, which is a whole disputed different matter, but that's a different story. So they read this as Bakka and say, oh look, this points at that. But these words are completely different. They don't sound the same. What Bakka means, according to the traditional narrative, according to interpretations by scholars, is weeping, or it refers to a specific tree, which is why it describes a valley of weeping or a valley of trees. The same word is mentioned in 2 Samuel 5:23, where it says, "You shall not go directly up, circle around behind them, and come at them in front of the Bachaim," which is translated as trees or balsam trees. It could be that this is a place called the Valley of Weeping in a poetic way, or that it has certain trees, which is why it is called that. There was also no spring or well, which would correspond to the Zamzam well in Mecca. What the passage says is, passing through the valley of Bakka, they make it a spring. The early rain also covers it with blessings. What is described here is that this is a valley that people pass through before they appear before God in worship in Zion. And when they pass through the valley of Bakka, they make it a spring. This is clearly metaphorical, of joy, of the feelings that they have. They turn this place into a spring. The Psalms are very poetic. They use such language throughout, all the time. There is also no house of God here in the valley of Bacha or anything like that, as some Muslim apologists would want you to believe.
where there is a temple called Beit El, house of God.
This psalm is about Zion, the place of God, where people go to worship, God's dwelling place. The psalm begins with, "How lovely are your dwelling places, or your tabernacles, Lord of armies. My soul longed and even yearned for the courtyards of the Lord. My heart and my flesh sing for joy to the living God. The bird also has found a house, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may put her young. Your altars, Lord of armies, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Blessed is the person whose strength is in you, in whose heart are the roads to Zion. Passing through the valley of Bacha, they make it a spring. The early rain also covers it with blessings. They go from strength to strength. Every one of them appears before God in Zion." It continues, "Lord, God of armies, hear my prayer. Listen, God of Jacob. See our shield, God, and look at the face of your anointed. For a day in your courtyards is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather stand at the threshold of the house of my God than live in the tents of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord gives grace and glory. He withholds no good thing from those who walk with integrity. Lord of armies, blessed is the person who trusts in you." So this is about longing for the place where God is worshipped, where his house is. And people pass through the valley of Bacha when they go there. The valley of Bacha, or the valley of Bakka, or the valley of Bacha, accurately, is not the focus of this. It is merely a valley mentioned for the purpose of expressing emotions, expressing longing. It speaks of appearing before God in Zion. Where is Zion? The word Zion comes from Mount Zion, which was at the center of Jerusalem, where the stronghold, the fortress of this city was built. According to the biblical history, David comes and conquers that mount, that hill, and this city becomes the center of these people, becomes the center, the capital of Israel. And thereby Zion, which was the original place of this hill and of this city, becomes synonymous with the center of Israel, of the people of Israel, the house of God. Some Muslim apologists want to make the objection that this cannot be referring to Jerusalem, because David wrote the Psalms, and in the time of David there was not yet a temple in Jerusalem. But this objection fails on multiple levels. As explained, David conquered Jerusalem according to the biblical narrative, and Zion did become the capital, the seat of Israel, the land of God. The Ark of the Covenant, which was very significant to God's presence and glory, was brought to Jerusalem, while the tabernacle, which was a tent in which there was the representative or the actual presence of God, was in Gibeon. After David, King Solomon brought the tabernacle to Jerusalem, and there he built the temple. The bigger problem with this objection is that the Psalms are not all written by David. In fact, when you look at Psalms 84 and you read it in the Bible, you can see that the psalm is attributed to the sons of Korah. Traditionally, the author of this psalm is known as the psalmist, who is somebody among the sons of Korah, who have written or created some of the psalms. And the traditional understanding here was that this psalm was written by the Korahites during an exile or while they were distant in lands far away to express their longing for Jerusalem, for Zion, for the house of God, for the pilgrimage. This is where it gets really interesting and really troubling for the Islamic narrative. Zion as the house of God is mentioned very often throughout the Psalms. Psalms 87 is another psalm which is attributed to the Korahites. And that one says, "He has founded his city on the holy mountain. The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the other dwellings of Jacob." It further references Rahab, which is poetically used for Egypt, Babylon, and Philistia, and Tyre, and Cush. And the psalm is all about, again, praising the land and the house, the dwelling place of God and his people. Could this be about Mecca instead of Jerusalem? Another example is Psalm 42, which is also attributed to the sons of Korah. Here it expresses another longing and another praise, another stream of emotions for the house of God, while the speaker here hails from the land of Jordan, the heights of Hermon, from Mount Mizar, which is up here and is not even remotely close to Mecca. Another example is Psalms 48, again from the sons of Korah, in which it again says, "Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise in the city of our God, his holy mountain. Like the heights of Zaphon is Mount Zion, the city of the great king. God is in her citadels. He has shown himself to be her fortress." Again, compare two places around Jerusalem, and Zion is described as a place of glory with citadels. Jerusalem has a long history that we can actually historically track. When it comes to Mecca, we don't have anything. Psalm 78 is a psalm of Asaph. Here it says, "God is known in Judah, his name is great in Israel. His tabernacle is in Salem," which is another word for Jerusalem. "His dwelling place is also in Zion." Pretty clear, right? And one more example, a psalm attributed to David himself, Psalm 132. This is a very significant source. In this source, it talks about how the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his dwelling, saying, "This is my resting place forever and ever. Here I will sit enthroned, for I have desired it. And here I will make a horn grow for David." This is clearly in reference to the traditionally known Zion, with such a narrative that is completely unfamiliar and unknown to Islam. Using different references within the same collection of books, it is clear as day that Psalms 84 has nothing to do with Mecca. The scholarly idea around the Valley of Baqa is that it is like one of the many valleys mentioned in the Bible, which is mentioned for one of its attributes, and which plays no further significance, but it's only part of the narrative here. There are many valleys mentioned in the Bible, some of them significant because something important happened there, others not so significant and hard to point at in today's time. Another assertion that is made is that the Valley of Baqa is a place that David fled to, according to the Bible. This is somehow picked out by certain Muslim apologists, like the one that I talked to.
David at the time, he ran away and he stayed there for a while. So when he came back, he wrote a psalm about how much he misses this place.
And presented as supporting evidence. But this is very strange, because the Valley of Baqa, as mentioned, is only mentioned here in the Psalms 84, and in another place it is mentioned as trees in a battlefield. David does flee in the biblical narrative because he's supposed to be killed. He has a dispute with King Saul. But the place he flees is Philistia. He hides in the region, hides in places that he knows to escape his death, but to still be involved in domestic situations. Why would he flee to Mecca, which is a place that wasn't even known until the emergence of Islam? This is simply something that certain Muslim apologists made up out of thin air. There is one more thing, which is a location, a place mentioned in the Bible that is called Paran, or the Desert of Paran. And many Muslims assert that this desert of Paran and this valley of Baqa are somehow connected, and that this desert of Paran is clearly Arabia and clearly around Mecca. In this case, again, this is a completely disconnected puzzle piece. The desert of Paran has nothing to do with the valley of Baqa in the Bible. Paran is mentioned in Genesis 14:6, in which it explains old history and says the Horites on their mountain Seir as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness or by the desert. The locations mentioned around here within context, especially Mount Seir, have nothing to do with the region Mecca. Paran is mentioned with big significance in Deuteronomy 1 verse 1. What it says here is, "These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel across the Jordan in the wilderness, in the Arabah, opposite Suf, between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab." It is 11 days' journey from Horeb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. Some of these locations are not exactly known. Some of them are vaguely put. But from all the information that we have here, it describes the location of Moses across the Jordan in a wilderness in Arabah, between Paran and several other locations, 11 days' journey from Horeb on this route, which will be somewhere here in the region, and definitely not in Mecca. In Numbers 10, the Torah, the Bible describes that the Israelites on the 20th of the month set out on their journey from the wilderness of Sinai and traveled from place to place until the cloud came to rest in the desert of Paran. So here it is mentioned related to Sinai, and they settle there after they take off on the 20th day from Sinai. In 1 Samuel 25, here David does go to the wilderness of Paran, but not because he flees. It says, when Samuel died, all Israel gathered to mourn for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David set out and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And some Muslim apologists desperately want to interpret this as him going to Mecca for some reason. The problem is that David, while he is in Paran, is still very close to his home region, and he interacts with a man in Maon whose business is in Carmel, and he sends people back and forth and goes back and forth. Maon is here, Carmel is here. Does it sound like Paran is somewhere here, or does it sound like Paran is way down here? In Numbers 13 it describes the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. I know, I think the matter is already settled, but I'll go on and give 3 more examples. In Genesis 21:21, Ishmael lives in the desert of Paran, which is why Muslims want to think this is Mecca, because according to their mythical narrative, Ishmael was in Mecca and Abraham was there with him when he built the Kaaba. But Ishmael's mother, Hagar, who was Abraham's servant, not his wife, is from Egypt, and here in Genesis 21:21 she goes to Egypt to get a wife for Ishmael from Egypt, which would be very inconvenient to do from down here. Here we have a very big issue. A conflict is described, and here is Hadad or Hadad, the Edomite, who is an enemy of Solomon. And in 1 Kings 11, it tells us that Hadad, while still a boy, fled to Egypt with some Edomite officials who had served his father. They set out from Midian and went to Paran. Then taking people from Paran with them, they went to Egypt. The Pharaoh king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house and land and provided him with food. Does this sound like he fled to Mecca? As we can see, regarding the Valley of Baqa and regarding Paran, we have so many references. If we actually use them and actually look at the context, then the Islamic narrative is beyond absurd. There is not only no reason to believe that the Bible describes the Kaaba and Mecca, it is also extremely absurd to use these sources to assert that the Bible does reference the Kaaba and Mecca. Also, the Kaaba is supposed to be of huge significance for Abraham, in the story of Abraham. That's where the first temple is built. That's where Abraham is supposed to invite everybody to. So you would expect that the Kaaba and Mecca are mentioned in the Torah, in Genesis, in the story of Abraham, not in the Psalms, which are songs of praise and of other issues. If you want to reference the Bible, according to the Bible, Abraham's journey took place mostly in these regions. We have sources that mapped the journeys of Abraham according to the Bible. Why would Abraham be up here when his job is to invite the people of the world to some cube in Mecca? Why would Mecca, why would the Kaaba be removed from all of the Bible? Why would people forget this entirely? Why would there be no sign anywhere? The problem is much bigger than this, and I will go on with that. The problem is that we have no reference to a thing like the Kaaba anywhere in history until the emergence of Islam. We have no mention of a place called Mecca. The closest thing that we have is a place mentioned as Makoraba, written down and pointed at by Ptolemy, and the location does not really fit with the location of Mecca. And apparently it is just some random place that doesn't play a huge regional or universal significance as Islam would make us believe. So here we have it. The Valley of Baqa, which is actually a Baqa narrative, is completely bad. The Desert of Paran narrative is bad. There is no mention of the Kaaba and of Mecca in biblical sources and not outside. And this creates a big problem for the credibility of Islam. The Kaaba is at the center, at the heart of Islam. The Kaaba could be described as the heart of Islam, and that's a problem. Thanks for watching. If you like what I'm doing, if you think this is important, if you want to support me in this, please don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to share. And if you can, please support me on Patreon or on apostateprophet.com. I appreciate all your support very much. I will go on. I will be back soon. Have a fantastic day, and please stay away from Islam.